The recent APEX EXPO kicked off with a keynote speech from Mr. Ed Shapiro, a former airline executive now turned industry investor. For those of you unable to make it to Anaheim, a chance now to meet Mr. Shapiro in person and put some of his theories under the microscope. If you're at all interested in where our industry is going over the next few years, I suggest you watch and listen carefully, as we are about to hear some very insightful thoughts. Ed Shapiro. Shapiro, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Ed,
thank you.
I enjoyed very much your presentation to APEX back in September. I think a lot of people did as well. But for those who didn't attend, we want to perhaps revisit some of the areas, some of the discussion topics you raised. And I want to ask you, first of all, what was your eureka moment in terms of suddenly seeing the light, in terms of in-flight entertainment, in terms of connectivity?
Sure. Well, I come at this from the perspective of an investor, a long-time investor in the airline industry and the media entertainment industry. These very different, separate industries that I thought, frankly, had no overlap whatsoever. And I think the eureka moment for me was sitting on my first JetBlue plane, seeing live television being broadcast on a plane that was working, giving you this live entertainment that previously wasn't available. And thinking, well, there's this interesting, very large audience that sits on a plane that the entertainment industry in one way, shape, or form would value.
You mentioned your first visit to an APEX convention, which was Toronto, I think back 2007, was it?
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. What were your impressions?
Well, really, I was in learning mode. I came to Toronto in 2007 to learn, to sit in the sessions, talk to people that I got to know throughout the conference, listen to speakers, and try to understand what this business looked like today as a separate standalone business, kind of at the intersection of my two worlds of airlines and entertainment.
Where are you at now personally in terms of how you see our industry in 2014?
I think, over the course of the 7 or 8 years I've spent looking at this industry, the industry has evolved. A lot has changed since I attended that first WAEA conference in 2007. The move from overhead predominantly to in-seat, to video on demand. That's an important trend that we've seen on the residential market, the invention of the DVR, where consumers now became accustomed to having exactly the content they wanted, when they wanted. Did they want to sleep for the first hour of the plane? Did they want to watch a movie? Did they want to watch a TV show? As opposed to looking up at a screen and having to watch at hour one the movie that was selected for them. So I think that was an important driver, really looking at what's happened on the ground, covering the cable and satellite space like I do, and saying a lot of those trends were going to be relevant in the air. And so we made our first investment in that space, in the hardware space, a company called Lumexis that had a vision for taking the product development, fiber-based, high-definition, on-demand architecture that has been basically deployed as the standard across the world and adapting that to the in-flight environment. So we made that investment in 2007. I then turned my attention to connectivity, which was frankly a new industry. You couldn't have, with the exception of the cockpit communications, there hadn't been a commercial rollout of in-flight connectivity. Connection by Boeing in the early 2000s failed for a number of reasons, but not necessarily because people didn't want to connect, but it wasn't an economic structure. And a lot had changed. Most significantly, the proliferation of low-cost devices like phones and tablets, all of which now had Wi-Fi capabilities, whereas previously you were limited to really a subset of laptop providers. So the question in my mind was, how would that market develop? What were the different technologies? Really air-to-ground and satellite-based. Both have pros and cons, but made a decision that I wanted to be on a platform that was global. I saw the airline industry as a global industry, and ultimately planes don't fly from point to points, obviously. They fly in a straight line, and the one thing I recall from my elementary school days is that 2/3 of the Earth's surface is covered by water. So I believe, and I have a long history in covering the satellite industry on the ground in the residential business, and so I thought that technology lent itself very well to an airline market that obviously can't have a wired alternative. So I started working on understanding what the economics were of contracting for transponder space to be able to deliver a two-way product. There's a company called Hughes Communications that I knew from my days of covering DirecTV, and Hughes was a part of that, and they developed an residential business for two-way connectivity that had a difficult time competing with cable, but when you get into the air and cable's not an option, this could be a very interesting platform. The other significant difference is that it's scalable. So how to view that, like we've seen on the ground, the more capacity, the more bandwidth that you give a consumer, the more they're going to use it, and they'll find uses for it. And as that demand developed in the air, people wouldn't be satisfied with a narrowband experience. They'd want a broadband experience. And so satellite technology has the benefit of being scalable, contracting for more transponders as demand warranted.
The other side of the equation, of course, is the aviation industry itself, because as a company, Global Eagle can't function without having a successful, profitable aviation industry. Now, you quoted in your speech here at APEX a very well-known investor, probably one of your heroes, Warren Buffett,
Correct.
Who said the best thing that could have ever happened to the aviation industry was that Orville Wright be shot at birth. Well, what was he suggesting there?
Well, to be clear, he said that it was purely from a capitalistic perspective. He wasn't suggesting that the airline industry doesn't serve a useful purpose for society. But from an investment perspective, up until really a couple of years ago, this industry had the distinction of net losing money over its entire history. In the early 2000s, mid-2000s, the industry was losing $5 billion a year. That's quite an accomplishment for any industry, particularly an industry that was valued. Customers were still using it, but it had a cost structure that was out of line with its revenue. So a lot had to change. I was on the board of US Airways through sort of the first phase of this, but my premise was that we needed consolidation. There were simply too many seats chasing too few passengers at $100 oil. That business could not be economic. So what happened through that period were a number of mergers in the US we're talking about right now that ended up through bankruptcies and mergers, an industry that is structurally sound. It's still cyclical and always will be. It's still capital and labor intensive and highly regulated and always will be. But having said that, it's an industry that can earn a decent average rate of return, and I think that's what we're seeing right now.
In what state is the aviation industry here in America and also worldwide?
I think you're seeing a couple of different trends here. In the United States, you're seeing the benefits of this consolidation. You're seeing record margins, operating margins, really across the board. The legacy network carriers, the established low-cost carriers like a Southwest, and the more recent emerging ultra-low-cost carriers, the Spirit and the Allegiant. All of those groups, almost without exception in the US, are doing extremely well right now and get close to near record margins. Internationally, there's more of a mix. You have low-cost carriers like a Ryanair in Europe or an AirAsia X in Asia that are, frankly, wreaking havoc on legacy cost structures. There are, for various reasons, more barriers to consolidation in international markets. For one, you have multiple countries in each of these continents that you don't have in the United States. And so there is some turmoil going on, and in some of these places, airlines, particular airlines, are suffering. In other cases, they may be sort of muddling through. But I think probably nowhere near no one is doing as well as the airlines in the United States. And so they've got to work through that. The Middle Eastern carriers, as you said, are growing quite rapidly. That's having a pretty significant impact on some of the business of the traditional European carriers. And there has to be an adjustment for that.
So what are the implications for our industry generally, and in particular for GEE, about the state of the US aviation industry right now?
So I think this industry, while not a direct participant in airline profitability, is certainly concerned with the continued viability, first and foremost, with our airline customer base, and secondly, with their growth prospects. We are measured in one way or another by the number of passengers that we can serve with our range of products. We're innovating, we're adding to our portfolio collectively as an industry of the products that we serve, but we need a healthy customer base. And the fact that we have relatively stable fuel, relatively stable global economy for the last 5 years means that the airlines, by and large, are thriving. They are buying new aircraft, new narrow body with very fuel efficient economics, the next generation from Airbus and Boeing, new next generation wide bodies in the 787 and the A350s. Those are creating more and more passenger opportunities for us as an IFE&C industry to serve.
for airlines, it's always been about the profitability, about the bottom line. How can our industry help those airline customers achieve that?
Yeah, I think it's an important role and one that really technology is leading for us, allowing us to help our industry, help our customers succeed. First and foremost, as it always has been, lowering their costs. We need to innovate. We need to have lower cost of ownership, lower weight, and drive down the costs for our airline partners. That's how we're going to succeed. But I think increasingly we have an opportunity to do a couple of other things. One is differentiate their product. As the range of products and services that we offer grow, particularly with connectivity, we have an opportunity to help our airlines say to their customers, fly us because we have something that their competitors don't have. So as a supplier, if we can do that, that's, I think, a very important goal. Secondly, I think we now have an opportunity, really just starting to emerge now, to bring new sources of revenue. What the buzzword is ancillary revenue. So airlines try to drive as high a load factor as they can. They try to drive as high a ticket average fare price as they can. They're now finding creative ways by basically unbundling their product to sell the passengers different things, whether it's bag fees, booking fees, premium seats, premium economy, upgrades. That's where the airline industry has this captive audience. They've already spent all the money they need to get a passenger on a plane. Now they want to sell them more. That's a very high margin opportunity, and I think we as an industry, an IFE and C industry, have a unique opportunity with our relationship on the airplane to drive those sources of incremental ancillary revenue for them. And if we can do that, then we become a value-added true partner to the industry as opposed to simply a vendor.
That sounds fine in theory. Have you been able to do this in practice?
We have. I would say we're in the early stages of this, but I can give an example from the Global Eagle and Southwest Airlines perspective. We launched in 2012 a live television, a very innovative live television product, delivered over our same satellite, the same antenna that they were using, that we were using for our two-way internet service. Because KU satellite has very large amounts of bandwidth possible, we were able to expand our capacity, and instead of using all that incremental capacity for more two-way service, we used it for a broadcast service. So we put together a package, I think initially of 10 channels, now we're up to about 20 channels, very efficiently using the same satellites, an adjacent transponder, received on board the plane, same server, same wireless access point, delivered to people's same devices. And now you have, in addition to two-way connectivity, an entertainment source, a very innovative live television service that we married with on demand. We have a server on board the plane that can be efficiently refreshed. So we have stored movies and TV, and we have live television.
Do you see this as a role model for future arrangements, future similar sort of exercises in the future?
I do. I think you will see a number of what I would say are high-value sponsorships. It could have been a consumer products company. It could have been anyone who might want to be associated with the affluent airline audience that we serve. But I think as we as an industry roll out additional products, things like texting, messaging service that we have now on Southwest, movies on demand that we now have, shopping, destination deals. Each of those verticals, I think there are opportunities to have an affinity relationship with a third party who's doing that on the ground today.
Finally, Ed, it's been very interesting talking to you, but I want to ask you a question in the sense, what is it in the future that excites you about our industry? What new developments, what new technical developments coming along over the next few years? What do you think is going to be the big breakthrough?
I think the proliferation of wireless. We've seen the very beginnings of that in the United States more so than internationally, but the opportunity to reach essentially all the passengers traveling on a single aisle aircraft, that's been extremely limited. There have been niche opportunities for airlines, for those airlines to invest in an in-flight entertainment or connectivity system. That's what's changing now. So there are many airlines around the world that today can't justify the cost of a satellite system and having connectivity, but they can justify and will justify, I believe, a wireless entertainment. If we can offer them a rich array of content options to entertain them, to inform them, then I think you're going to see all kinds of new opportunities and really an exponential increase in the number of passengers that we as an industry can reach.
Ed, sounds like a brave new world. I wish you the best of luck and thanks for being our guest today.
Thank you, Steve. My pleasure.
Coming up, Steve Harvey brings you another informative and interesting interview with a leading professional from the ranks of our in-flight entertainment industry. Don't miss it. That's next time on the PME Interview.